over your x-axis, because that's all we really did. 315 degrees has a reference angle of 45, because it's 45 degrees away from 360. So I'm going to use 45 degrees. And then 330 degrees has a reference angle of 30 degrees. And we just labeled our coordinates. Really? People ask me, do we have to memorize this, Ms. Ross? No, please don't try to memorize all of this. If we have the first quadrant, we can find everything else because it's all going back to your reference angles. I also wouldn't really encourage you to memorize these because there's lots of 2s, 3s, and 1s, and it gets confusing. So think about your special right triangle, like I did going over that first quadrant. Okay, I want you to keep this to your side and have out your notes from Monday. We graphed on Monday. We also did, oh, look at that, special right triangles. You're going to join me on this page. We're going to graph each angle, state the reference angle, and then state the corresponding coordinates. So coordinates meaning your x and your y. Okay. Before we do this, I just want to remind you that I'm going to use only that first quadrant and always go back to my reference angles. That's why it's on every single homework. So what I do is I actually make the first quadrant again with all my coordinates, and I practice from there. I want to do one together, then I'm going to have you try the rest by yourself, and I'll put the answer key on Haiku so that you can check your work. I don't want to start with 60 because it's in the first quadrant, and I believe that you guys can do that. So I want to try 120 degrees. First, if I think about 120 degrees when we graph, we always start at that positive x-axis. This would be 90 degrees, and then 180. So I know it has to be somewhere in the second quadrant. I think about which one is it closer to. Well, 120 is closer to 90 than it is to 180. If I think about my reference angle, remember reference angles, you always compare back to your x-axis. So how far is 120 from 180? 60 degrees. Okay. When I think of my coordinates, I have to think what's going to be negative. In the second quadrant, only our x's are negative. Then I go back to my first quadrant. If I look at my first quadrant for 60 degrees, you only went over a half, you only went over a little bit, and you went up square root of 3 over 2. So it keeps it, using that reference angle, same coordinates. The only thing I had to worry about was that my x is now negative. Okay, I'd like you to try the rest and then compare your answer key to mine on Haiku. See you guys tomorrow.